Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we're joining from today.
I'm joining from Lisarow on the lands of the Darkinjung people.
And I am joining from the lands of the Nyungbul people of the Bundjalung Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We acknowledge their deep and ongoing connection to land, waters, language and culture, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
So welcome back to Femmebot. Today we've got Louise Cummins, who we are so excited to speak to. Louise is an award-winning Chief Marketing Officer, AI strategist and transformation leader who helps organisations navigate disruption with clarity, confidence and commercial impact. Across her career, Louise has led large-scale marketing and digital transformations across enterprise, not-for-profit and purpose-led organisations. She's been recognised twice on Australia's CMO 50 list, including the top 25 for her impact as a senior marketing leader.
Most recently, Louise served as CMO at World Vision Australia, where she led strategy, brand, digital transformation, data and analytics. Such a mouthful, and support her experience delivering record growth alongside award-winning campaigns. Today, she's focused on the next wave of change. She's the co-founder of the Australian Centre for AI and Marketing, which is super interesting to us, and CEO of AI Ready Consulting. She works with executive teams to move beyond AI experimentation towards ethical, people-led transformation, which is amazing. This is a very long intro. She's also a speaker, author, certified coach, non-executive director and founder of CMO Inner Circle Network, supporting senior women in marketing and donating proceeds to women's charities. Welcome to Femmebot, Louise. That is such a long intro because you've done so much in your career. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love these type of women's-based, programming. I think it's fantastic. So long admirer. So thank you so much for asking me on to join.
Thanks so much for talking to us. We feel very privileged. You've led, obviously, transformations across so many different organisations and sectors. When you look back, what was your initial thing that drew you into marketing and change leadership?
So I was trying to reflect on that because I've had lots of different chapters. When I first started my degree, I actually did applied maths and also psychology and fine art. And I was actually reflecting on that just the other day, and I was thinking, actually, I now understand it because I've always been fascinated between that intersection of creativity, human behavior, and data and how that actually operates. So that's probably been the through line. And I think that's how I ended up in marketing. Marketing is a beautiful discipline where it does actually infuse those pieces. The other thing is that marketing leads you to go into so many different industries and speak to so many different people. And I've been fortunate enough to be in marketing for the movie industry as I have marketing for the abolition of human trafficking. So it worked, alongside Kim Kardashian with the people that, live at $2 a day. So it's been a really interesting process. It's been really interesting and fascinating, especially just seeing people from so many different walks of life. And I think marketing enables you to do that, but also have this beautiful intersection of insight and creativity overlaid that. But also I'm really deeply I only started to realize this as I was getting into my career, how deeply passionate I was for organizations that are going through big disruptions or categories that are going through big disruptions. Because I feel like that's when kind of that real, flex that you need to have in order to make those big changes. So that's kind of what drew me more into that change space. And I've then since been involved with a lot of different categories, and I don't think it was by design. I think it was just something that I was drawn to. So I was at Fujifilm with the first digital cameras, first team to bring Invisalign into Australia, first team at Optus with product management for iPhones, first team with MGM Studios bringing DVDs in, which probably ages me a lot, but it's also been quite interesting to have being involved in sectors that have those big, deep change, which I love.
And that's kind of
Yeah.
led to a reinvention, right? So because
Yes.
you enjoy that kind of challenge of something, yeah, something disruptive.
I mean, they're
But
all
even
massively
yeah,
disruptive categories. Like
Yeah.
even oral health is such a, it's constantly evolving. I think change can be really nerve-wracking, and there's a
Wow.
lot of fear around when there's big disruptions in industries like right now. Have you lent into that fear, and rather than, I guess, let it prohibit your movement in your career?
fear is fascinating. And I think anybody that's been through big times when they were fearful in their careers, it's generally led to something bigger, right? So there's very few people that if they've been retrenched, they often, there's very few people that 3 years later you go, I'm actually not in a better place. It's
Right.
interesting that it can drive a lot of decisions, but actually once you get through it, you realize that actually it's okay to have that and it's a wave. So for me, it's about acknowledging who I am in the process and acknowledging what is real fear or what am I kind of manifesting more. So when I left my previous role, there was a piece of me that was like, what am I doing? I actually just
Mm.
finished my book about it. Like, what am I doing? I woke up at 4 a.m. going, about to turn 53, and single mum. I'm now deciding to reinvent myself in the age of AI and unprogram all my programming and lean into this space. And it was terrifying. But I
Yeah.
also really actively tried to understand what are the different neuroscience principles I had to adopt and actually acknowledge when I wasn't making potentially good decisions because I was like really nervous about security and
Mm.
overly indexed. So I think to answer your question, change is inevitable. Like our cells are changing just this during this call, right? Everything's ongoing change, but there's an illusion that we want to keep consistency. And I think once you kind of understand who you are and what are your triggers within that change, really does help you to push through that process.
What's your message to people that are sitting in that fear of losing their jobs or, just overarching message? Because I'm sure you've got something that you say to that.
Yeah. So I had somebody in my old role that work came up to me and said, is my job safe? And I
Mm.
said, no. And the reason your job isn't safe is because it's changing
Mm.
as it
Mhm.
currently stands. But my role as a leader is to help navigate how we actually change your role and your skill set so that it is right for this next era. So as it stands at the moment, that role as such
Yeah.
isn't. That doesn't mean that you're not. It's just about then how do you change that? Look, we're going through what I believe is as much change as the Industrial Revolution.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I feel like it's like a saddle maker during the start of cars, getting really nervous that their saddle making factory is going down. Yes, it will. But you know what? People pivoted. They were able to actually do different things. So I've said this story quite a lot, but I will say it again, is the random juxtaposition, but it's something that I've lived with. So my son was diagnosed with autism when he was young. And I remember my mind swirled with possibilities of what, you know, often the worst case scenarios, right? And I remember the pediatrician said to me something that changed me, which was 90 days. He said, you can think about all the different scenarios in the future, but chances are it won't be right. You can, it's in your control is how can you be the best mum you can be to make him the best version he's meant to be in the next 90 days. So I'm not trying to say that, the fear of different roles being let go is not founded, but my suggestion would be rather than getting inertia, how can you lean into this and how can you upskill so that you are in the game and just focus on the next 90 days? Because who knows what's going to happen after that, right?
Mm.
Yeah. That's a nice That's a nice parallel, because I feel like you're so right. When you have a neurodivergent child, there is no point speculating on what it's going to look like. But at the same time, you're grieving what you thought the future was going to be. And I guess we can relate that back to what we're going through now. And like people who have worked really hard in, say, their
Mm,
careers to be a photographer or an area
mm.
which is really being impacted, you can't get stuck in grieving what you thought the future was going to be like, but rather, I guess, look at the next 90 days and what can you do
Yeah.
now to have an impact.
It's interesting as well that, that he said that as well, because I mean, we use that in business, right? I've never heard that before because we've got a small business. We use it in business. We look at our 90 days and,
Well, it
and
takes
what,
down the overwhelm.
yeah,
It
it takes
does
on
take
the,
down,
yeah,
takes, yeah.
and it makes sense. It's like, it's a very practical application, to manage.
Well, it's very different in business, right? It's very different in business than it is in our personal life.
Yeah.
Because in our personal life, we're ruled by fear and what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. But actually, if you sort of take it down to how are you going to be in the business of yourself and
Yes.
actually map out
Yeah.
yourself in this, it's a really important piece.
Yeah. I love that.
I think what you said earlier sort of leans into my next question, just about your team coming to you with these questions around AI and is my job safe? But obviously, you move from these award winning CMO roles into AI strategy and advisory work. What were you seeing within the organizations that made that shift feel like the right next move for you?
Like I said, I've always been intrigued by change and tech and disruption, but I also realized that the playbook of how organizations did change was going to have to be very different.
Mm.
So for me, this is kind of a little bit like getting a chessboard and all the players and just throwing it up in the air, right? This is so big. So it's showing disconnect with I'm mixing up analogies, but it's kind metaphors. It's kind of like shining a light on glass that was kind of sticky taped together with masking tape and it all looked fine from the surface, but when you put the light on, there's disconnect between ELT and showing exposures with data and tech and culture and strategy and all the rest of it. So I found that kind of really interesting. And I suppose I was really intrigued about how you unpack that to actually support people going through it. So when I've seen organizations do it really well is when they're actually having those hard conversations of going, we're not going to get this perfect, but we're going to actually all lean into this and
Mm.
actually, as one, find solutions. Where I've seen it not work is when people get terrified, Catherine, like you said. And what
Yeah.
happens is they get into this cognitive overload, they get really nervous, it's all too hard, and then they just stop.
Mm.
Yeah.
Whereas if you actually started going, you know what, it's the next 90 days. I don't actually know what's going to happen in the next 90 days after that, but I can just work out how I'm going to be the best version of myself in this new era for the next 90 days.
What do you think leaders most underestimate about AI-led disruption, especially when it comes to people rather than technology?
Often has anybody gone, that was a really good change management program? Like we've all been involved in it, right? It's
Yeah.
very hard to actually do
Mm.
change. So I think there's a bit of an underestimating of change. I think at the moment, AI enablement is either being owned by CTOs or COOs. Marketing hasn't had enough of a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it's still almost within the marketing training budget more than actually really deep investment about where they actually need to go with it. So the biggest things that I think that the leaders are doing is actually taking more of a systems approach because it's a full ecosystem. So
100%.
I feel like there's a lot of like this I will train that pocket, we'll embed that one tech, we'll do this one initiative, we'll get this one keynote. And then in addition, there's a tsunami of content that's just coming from it. So everybody's talking about AI and right. So, and what I'm saying is, why are we not learning from the same mistakes that we did when we were trying to do MarTech, right? Take a breath, work out how are you going to use this as a growth driver? What is the right? It does it fit with
Mm.
your strategy? Does it fit with your customer experience? And then actually take a framework approach for full systems change Whereas I think that's the biggest thing that leaders aren't getting because they're kind of just, it's almost happening
Mm.
versus going, okay, for that next 90 days, let's take a breath and actually create a structure, but a full
Yeah.
structure. What's happening with the people pillar? What's happening with the tech pillar? What's happening with the content? But you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
they don't think of it as a full system because we're still so early in. On top of all of this, you're talking about the chessboard, there's no time. Then how do you actually find enough time to actually give this space to kind of go, we're going to rechange everything that we're doing. So it's a challenging time for marketers.
So it's almost like, because I get what you're saying, but I think there's definitely a certain amount of experimentation that needs to happen, which you're saying everyone's just going out and experimenting, but without a strategy. So strategy first, then experimenting within a more directed kind of experimentation or a more controlled experiment. You know what I mean?
That's
Experiment.
what that's what I would be doing because otherwise what you're going to do is have so you want to democratize this. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. This shouldn't be because it's actually affecting every area. It shouldn't be just at the top. So you want to encourage experimentation. What I'm saying is you kind of need to do it in a structured way.
Yeah.
So there's different reports, but there's an extraordinary. So it's like over 50% of people were using non-approved AI tools at enterprise level, but using it on their personal laptops or their phones and emailing it to themselves, right? So that's not the right approach.
Yeah.
So you want people that are experimenting, but that's a good example of you're not unleashing the teams, but there's no real clear
Mm.
strategy and
Mm.
governance in
Yeah.
place. So that's what I'm saying is take a breath and actually get those foundational points and most importantly, governance and ethics and build that in, but then have considered large scale experimentation and then enable everybody to kind of take that because you're going to need to get in that mindset of testing and we always used to say fail fast and I've never seen that really not weaponized. Like it's always like marketers have a tendency of, changing the past to kind of make things
Mm.
look better than
Mm-hmm.
what they were. But I believe it has to be in a structured way.
So
Mm.
that's a good kind of segue because you talk about a lot about people first and ethical AI as well. So what does that look like, on top of this kind of structure? What does that look like in practice for leaders right now?
Yeah. So as part of that sort of level setting, I really believe in having your true North Star. So what is it that you're using AI to do? So I think Tony from UNICEF is amazing. And I remember he said something which I thought was such a great North Star, which was we are going to use AI to stretch our organization, not shrink it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very deliberate that that's how he's going to use AI. So I feel like it is a real importance in actually going, why are you doing this in the first place?
Yeah, that's super. So finding the purpose, what's the purpose of
Yeah.
what's the purpose of this AI? It's almost like redefining your own mission statement, but
Yeah.
with AI.
And then you can build structure around it. Yeah.
It doesn't change your overarching kind of
No.
purpose and vision, but I think there needs to be an ethical North Star. So I've worked in some creative institutions. I won't name them, but and they've had to really go, okay, what does this look like for us? So for them, it might be that we will never use AI people in it, but we will
Mm.
use AI for editing or whatever that looks like. What
Mm-hmm.
is the framework? And then also there's that piece of what does it look like for your customer? Like, are they clear that they're interacting with AI? What and are you going to remain deeply human throughout it, or are you going to augment it? I'm not so much. I mean, people at one stage when it first started said you had to they were endorsing being really upfront about every section of AI. But I mean, we've been using Photoshop for
Yeah.
ages. You know what I mean? Like, there's already a distorted view of reality ever since social media, actually. So I don't know if we have to do that. But I do think for the big stuff, there should be some disclosure. But I think having that true north really helps you go, and everybody's on the same page then.
And do you think that's something that, say it is an agency like ours, that you want to be transparent about because it is sort of reflective of your values, the way that you are using it.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really
100%.
helpful
Yeah.
because I think it's internally, it's definitely something that I feel like for me, especially as a creative person in the company, it is a constant back and forth around what am I okay with? And is this, it's like a love-hate relationship with AI. Like in some ways it's really helpful, in others I don't feel cool about it. So I think that's a really great idea, putting parameters around what as a
Mm.
company you're trying to achieve by using it in the first place, and then what you're okay with.
And I want to pull a thread that you just said, which was, I don't feel cool about it. I think it's really important in all of this to not weaponize the pessimists. So I often say you need optimists and pessimists
Mm-hmm.
in every team because the optimists build the plane and the pessimists build the parachutes, right? You need both players. So if you're going, this doesn't fit right with me,
Yeah.
I get concerned when those people aren't listened to because you need that sort of like if it's not sitting well with you, that's not right. So we're doing some work in the youth space, right? So we're actually in saying to families, be purposeful of how you want to bring this in. So how are we purposely want this in our lives and have that as a clarity? Because this doesn't have to just happen. You should be leading with how this works intentionally that's right for you. But unless you have that North Star and the strategy, all that's going to happen is everybody's just going to run around and do 1,000 things, or you're going to have people in the corner that are frozen in fear with inertia and won't actually change. And it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy that they'll lose their job because of AI because they just haven't moved.
I guess from the perspective of you coming in and working with teams, on that note, how do you come in and build confidence with AI rather than that fear and resistance? Like obviously you said 2 leaders, one being the positive, one being the negative, but then you've got a whole team of people
Yeah.
who are a mixture and somewhere in between. How do you approach working with the teams?
You know what? A big piece of it is just understanding, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of I had this reflection the other day when I was listening to not being within a team, it was actually a group of other like outside, it was an industry thing, and I was listening to them was trying to unpack their fear. And then I asked them a question about how much do you use it? And they weren't using it at all. And I was like, that's really interesting, right? Because it's like people are stepping back in the sidelines going, this is awful, but they're not actually at least giving it a go and saying, wait a second, this is, if I use this well, I can free myself up 3 hours a week on stuff I don't want to do. So I
Mm,
think it's about why are they unhappy? Like, and then actually leaning in and saying, well, at least how do you actually guide them through that process whilst honoring that different people will approach this in different ways and not to
mm,
kind of weaponize that. So, big piece of it is also to make it fun. So,
mm,
give people access, upskilling, make an AI champions group, make it fun, share learnings, test and learn, see what then you're starting to make it, give people time to do it, give them the resources. So that's how I would actually say is kind of the best approach.
yeah.
You spoke to unpacking that fear. I mean, that not using it is a big one that I've seen as well, but can you talk to any other ones? I'd be interested to know what are other ones that you've unpacked and been, that you just went, oh, wow, that makes
Yeah.
sense. What are the fear and reservations around AI? Just I'm interested if there are any others interesting.
Often the environmental impact comes up. So that is probably so
Yeah.
first and foremost is jobs.
Yeah.
Mm,
Second is this actually good for society and sort of having some questions about that. Third is probably the quality of the brand going down because they feel like there's the sort of AI slop. And then in it is also the environment. The environment seems to be getting a lot of traction. That's why I kind of said it first,
Mhm.
which is really interesting. So if you kind of think about those different levels, the environment, the great thing is there's a lot of people leaning into this space. It is something that's very actively being spoken about at government level. I think with this, I do believe that will actually get improvements. And also we haven't even sort of factored in what potentially this looks like for quantum, and that's kind
Yeah.
of all of this in warp drive. So it's very interesting. So I do think that will be addressed, but it is a real issue at the moment. So I don't want to actually downplay that, but that's an issue. Other two about like AI slop, it's really interesting. I mean, obviously there's been a lot in the press about the Jeans West ads and things and your integrity to brand and things. And I think that's a good example of, do you have the right strategy in place and do you have the right level of human oversight? So that's when you're sort of asking people to be more at ease with it. It's making sure that you're actually having that oversight. Does this look right? How are you going to actually taking away their fear by saying you are still going to be in control of your own brand? The other, yeah, so I think I've answered kind of. It's about actually understanding the genesis of why they're actually nervous and then sort of unpacking that. But
Yeah.
those are the kind of core top ones.
I would so love, and it's going to have to be another time if you have time, but obviously we work because we have a part of the business that does a lot of beauty and fashion and lifestyle content, and that industry is so fearful and very concerned because it's changing so rapidly. And I think your take on it would be so helpful, because I think also from what I'm reading, there is going to be a bit of a flip back to really, essentially these are consumer products. People want to know from humans if these are products that work and that are great, and how do they look on real
Totally.
humans. So I think there's always going to be that place for human made content, and perhaps it's about working out within the strategy where AI can work and save time and blah, 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 but where that human made content is still really valid. But I know that's a whole other conversation, but I think,
No, I think it's the same conversation, right?
mm,
Because I feel like there will be a natural shift, I think. I've got nothing to prove. This is just a gut feel. I think people will also then go back to what is deeply human.
mm,
So I think they're probably going to quite like flaws in ads. They're going to probably like going to plays when there's real people and they're all
mm,
like a bit worried that they've forgotten their lines, because it sort of adds to the sort of suspense
energy.
of it. We love outdoor markets. I was reflecting the other day, I went to Coles and there's a whole heap of wonderful innovations, brand new Coles, and I was reflecting because it was one of my very first jobs. And I remember there at the time there was all this, we're going to get rid of checkout checks. It's all going, but now, yes, people are doing it themselves and all the rest of it. But there are still these people around. So we're okay with if it really adds value to the process, but we still want to have that sense of, community and people being around. And I think in all of this, there's this piece potentially that we're a little bit thinking everything's going to change, but I actually feel like there will be a natural flow back to people wanting to see that authenticity, and especially in beauty brands. I mean, that's why there's such a rise of the TikTok influencers. They want to
Mm,
see real people. And on top of that, they get very funny when there's been a lot of controversy around, if the influencers aren't clear that they're using fake lashes when they're putting on
mm,
mascara and things like that. So that's not an AI thing. I think it's about deep.
authenticity.
And my thing is, and it goes back to that true north, unless you've got deep authenticity of who you are and what you want to do, that's the problem, right? You sort of then get moved all over the place. And I feel like that's a really important focus, which I've sort of said before.
Alongside your advisory work, you're obviously also an author, a coach, and an advocate. How important has it been for you to build your identity beyond that single executive role?
So important. Roles come and go. And so I've always been a big believer. I remember I'm going to use his name as Tom. It's not Tom, but we had a family friend and Tom, who was a CEO, and he then retired. And Tom found it very hard to go, I'm not Tom, the CEO of X. He was now just Tom. And I think that's really important of making sure you're not too connected by what your full-time job is
Mm,
and who you are as a brand outside of your title. It also meant that I was very fortunate that I've had organizations that were supportive of advocacy work, of coaching and supporting the industry and mentoring. So I was very lucky in that. But it also helped me, I think, just be really clear about who I am. And part of what who I am is doing that role, not the infusion of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
No, so true.
you're releasing a book this year, which is focused on the
Yeah.
reinvention in the age of AI. What inspired you to write that right now?
To be honest with you, it was a little bit of therapy because I was knee deep in it, right? Every day I was like, I want to try and really learn myself, learn what's working, what's not working. So I started to try and sort of map it out in a way that actually I could learn every day. And then it didn't start off as a book, but it then naturally gravitated towards like, well, if I can give this and it helps, one or two people, then it's worth it.
What's one idea from the book that you really hope lands with your readers?
That reinvention is endless and it's not a destination.
Yeah, that's so nice. And it's
Yeah, I
very
love that.
broad. Anyone can sort of take that from that wherever they're at in their career or in their AI journey.
But
Yeah,
there's no end goal, right? So
no.
you've seen this with having kids or, yourselves, right? Like the roller coaster ride doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. So how do you navigate and keep going through the ups and the downs? Like I said, we kind of got this illusion of,
Yeah,
even like corporate people think there's this illusion of security, but actually the likelihood of people getting retrenched is incredibly high, right? So it's actually an illusion. So if you're not okay with change, it's challenging.
it's kind of a
Mm,
repeated mistake throughout our history, and that kind of falsified that you're going to land, your dream house, whatever it is, you're going to land in a spot and it's going to be, the roller coaster's going to end, but it's been
mm,
we've kind of stuck to since the beginning of time, and we keep repeating that mistake over and over again, where we keep hoping for this
savior.
yes
Pot of
maybe,
money.
or I don't know what it is, but just for things to be calm all the time, it's like life's just not like that.
And
Yeah.
I've seen, because I used to work in microfinance programs, and seeing women given microloans to then embody what they want to be as a business owner and actually get themselves out of poverty it's amazing. I remember meeting this one woman, and as a result of a $5 loan across sort of, I think it was 6 years, she'd then been able to afford a house. She was able to pay her kids to go to school. She was able to be a real support in her community. And that's a good example of somebody who just when given an opportunity, she really took that opportunity and rose. And I often think about her going, we are so lucky that been given so much opportunity, but sometimes we actually forget that how fortunate we are, even if we think we're at our lowest. Actually,
Mm,
we're very, very lucky in where we live that we have those opportunities.
100%.
So if reinvention is the mindset,
Yeah.
what's one small shift you think that leaders can start making today, if you're going to give one bit of advice?
Love
I
it.
would actually do something completely outside of your comfort zone. So, for example, early last year, I did a stand-up comedy improv class.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so
Hated it.
good. You
Oh,
hated
you know
it?
what? It was no. I hated going to it, and then it was like it was really fun, and I really put myself out of my comfort zone, and I loved it. When I meant hated, I was like, I remember
Yeah.
arriving, going, "Oh, I don't even know if I could get out of the car," and it was so much fun, right? I would actually say, because I was going to say some sort of standard generic stuff. I think sometimes just shocking yourself out of yourself. I think
Yeah.
that's why ice baths work, right?
So I think the women that are probably listening to this podcast and men, we're at a point where we are a certain way into our career. We've got a bit of stability, but taking risks feels very nerve-wracking. We're quite safe.
Fearful.
And there's
Yeah.
all this chat about, that psychological safety, blah, blah, blah. But like, I think, yeah, sometimes you really do just have to take a risk, step into the unknown in order to realize actually it's not that scary. I should do this more often. It's actually quite exhilarating.
But have a think about, and I'd question everybody, reflect on when did the most exciting things happen in your life? And it was never because you just did the BAU. It was because you actually put yourself out of your comfort zone. You got on that plane, you bought the house, you went on the date, you took the leap.
I just remember when I finished uni and, you talk to anyone about, do you think I can do this job or I want to do this? And everyone would it was kind of the mantra was, yeah, fake it till you make it. And that's gone now because you can really research every role, like you know what to expect. But I think jumping into things, we were used to it because you weren't able to really find out what any one job really looked like. You just had to jump in and think, well, I'll work it out.
The AI, the text changing, everything's changing. So it's a bit like, how do you just give it a go and
Yeah.
work yourself through it? So I think what you've just said is a beautiful almost through line to this whole
Thanks.
conversation.
Yeah. Oh,
Thank
well,
you.
we could have.
Yeah.
You go, Kat, you go.
I was just going to say thank you so much for being on, Louise. We won't keep you for, I know you're a very, very busy woman, so we won't
For
keep you
having
for
me.
any.
I love supporting this. And I mean, I will say one of the final things is it's so important women are leaning into this
Yeah.
because it's been developed predominantly by men.
Mm.
It's reflecting biases that are already within the internet, and
Mm-hmm.
less women are actually adopting it. Having these sort of conversations are so incredibly important because we're not going to address biases if we sat back on the sidelines. So I'm really grateful that I was asked today because I think it's a really important topic, but also really want to support the cause to actually get the word
Yeah.
out there that give it a go.
I mean, that's why we're doing this, right? Because we've been working with all these tech brands and just hearing all these incredible women speak, but they're not out there, So it's, yeah, so totally agree. Like, just important getting the conversations out there.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
So that's it for this episode of Femmebot, the podcast powering women in tech. If you liked what you heard, hit subscribe and share.